If I type one password like say ABC123, it opens up, right? That's very easy. It should be something different. So the intelligence search for everyone is forcing you to put one special character or integers into the thing just to make it complicated. Not necessarily it is not hackable, just make it complicated so that they move away from the devices, right? That's it. I don't not more into the technical details. I don't want to give that thing off. I don't want you guys to actually try to enjoy and be fun and do some hacking stuffs also. But just an information stuff that these are the things. Be precautious. Use those tools. Not predominantly is going to be helpful. Just play with the tools for that app, but don't try to do the other way around. Don't try to become a hacker in any cases. So these are some of the information. Probably believe it will be a good thought for you before having any food. Okay, so I am there over here. Any sort of information we can discuss about it. Okay.
Announcement. Under automation and dev QA ops, the very last session, that is robots for automated mobile testing, will be covered next. This is immediately post lunch, where which is going to be covered by Schneider Electric, and they're actually going to make use of robots. So the ones that are interested in attending the session, we certainly do so post lunch. So let's reassemble at 1:40 exactly over here, and the ones that want to attend the Schneider Electric session can always move to the next to the neighboring hall. Many thanks, Avinash.
Okay, thank you, Arjun.
A round of applause, please, man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Anand.
Thank you.
Shivanand, who happens to be the advisory software engineer and team lead with IBM. A brief introduction about yourself and then we can start.
Thank you very much. So, biologists usually say that the first 30 to 40 minutes after a meal, all blood from all your different parts of the body are rushing towards your stomach because the digestive juices have just kicked in. And that's a perfect time for a nap or siesta as we call it. But I'm going to go against the law of nature this time and try to move the blood away from the stomach. So don't complain if you're having digestion later, yeah? Okay, so I'm Shivanand and I'm from IBM. I'm currently an advisory software engineer and a product development lead in IBM Rational. And today I'm going to talk to you about testing as part of mobile DevOps really, and how the cloud can help here. We'll see some challenges. We talk primarily in the beginning, introduce the concept of mobile DevOps, what mobile DevOps is and why DevOps makes most sense for mobile development and testing. And then we'll talk about what testing currently happens, right? When you talk about mobile DevOps, what is the testing that happens? And is that testing really sufficient? Is there something else we should be concentrating on? And what are the things that we should be testing for? And then see how cloud APIs or a cloud system, which parts of it can be leveraged, how it can help in the entire process. Does that sound good? Yeah? All right. So quickly, just to give you a brief, right? So we all have smartphones, right? And probably the latest ones that are in the market. So just look at the graphs in the last few years of the growth in smartphone sales. And the one that's really getting out of the graph there is Android, as expected. And you see iOS is actually linked with whenever there is a release, right? I have a new iPhone release, a new iOS has come out, and then that's very much tied down to that. You still have some of, the fragmented it gets once you get into the platform. I'm talking about Android here, and you see there are so many players in the market today giving you Android devices. But luckily, we have one player there, Samsung, that's leading the market, right? So most of the smartphones coming out today, the volumes of sales are being driven by Samsung. You have a few from Google, you have Motorola, you have Verizon, you have other manufacturers as well. But then let's get into Samsung, right? And see what is the fragmentation we're talking about even in Samsung. With the type of devices they have, with the density of the device, the display density, the form factor, the screen sizes, you have a whole plethora there. And again, it's further fragmented. Now imagine testing for something like this, where you have so many OSs. For a given OS, you have so many device manufacturers. For a given device manufacturer, you have so many different devices. You have multiple, you have XDPI, EVDPI, LDPI, MDPI, all sorts of DPIs. Then you have what is the capability of the screen itself, and you have to develop and test your app for something like this. So even iOS in practice actually suffers fragmentation. So even though we have iOS 8 beta having come out, iOS 7 being the latest in the market, still there are devices on as old as iOS 4, for instance. Sorry. So with the fragmentation, you also have to deal with this challenge, right? Evolution of devices. I remember one of my co-speakers was mentioning last year at the same conference, what's the future of testing for wearables, with Google Glass having come out, with smartwatches having come out. Where are we going with testing? So you have to deal with fragmentation, you have to deal with evolution in technology. So where really is testing going? So what are the challenges, right? We talked about the fragmentations, we spoke about all of that. Now if you look at multi-platform support really, you have you have a wide variety of platform vendors, you have different OS types, you have different device types. We spoke about that. Now, if I had to develop an app on this, what was the type of app I developed? If I was building for mobile, what sort of apps could I develop? It could be pure native, yeah? I could have Android-specific apps, I could have iOS-specific apps. If I was to go web, all right, you have web-based apps. If I was supposed to do neither of that and go hybrid, in hybrid, there are 4 or 5 different models I can approach. So what is the type of application I'm going to develop for these different platforms? So let's say you did figure out how to do functional testing, performance testing, and automate all of that, given all this complexity. How would you then do something like deploying to the App Store? How would you test that out? How would you test versions that are on the application, that are going on the App Store? How do you know if the latest version works well with older versions? You know, is the App Store enforcing some things that are not allowing you to do updates and so on? So recently, I'm not even talking about the mobile-related apps here. We had an application that had an extension on the web store, the Chrome web store, right? And with Chrome having come out with their latest version, 33, 34, 35 recently, we realized that you could not do an offline installation of your extension. You would have to go to the web store to get the extension. There was no other way to do it. So enforcements of this type that are coming with these applications have also increased. So how would you test for something like that? And of course, when you develop for the web, it's an entirely different experience developing for mobile. There are many different things. Now, I know if I'm on my laptop and I'm connected, either wired or Wi-Fi, I probably want to stay connected through the entire period of time that I'm doing a particular task. But let's say I'm on a mobile and I'm traveling and there's a lot of 3G Wi-Fi toggling. How do I take care of that with my application? If my application had to connect to a backend service, how do I test for that? Right? Now, it could also be an optimized loading scenario, for instance. Now, I know how to do that in the web case, but for a local context, how do I make sure that my loading is optimized? If I had to look after performance impacts, I know that there is performance impact in the case of a web application between my service and the server. But in the case of the mobile, there's a network, there's a server, there is the service itself on the local device, there's the bandwidth speed, all of that is going to play a role, and how do you take care of that? So these are various challenges that we're seeing, right? So here comes what we call the mobile application development lifecycle, right? The enterprise app development lifecycle. So where do you start? You start with designing your app. You figure out which devices you want to build for, what are the OSs, what are the form factors you're going to cater to, and all of that. So once you've designed your application and your user experience, your application itself, you're going to start developing. So you're obviously, for maximum outreach, you would want to make a cross-platform application. So you would go ahead, create a cross-platform application, and then try and see what are the services that your application need to interact with. See which ones make more sense, which ones can help you scale across these different challenges. Once you do that, then you instrument your application, you want to get some analytics out of that, you want to see what sentiment analysis is there, you want to see what is the performance of the application. So you instrument it for a whole lot of things, security, management, and so on. Okay, and then comes the crucial part, testing, right? So you see, we've actually drawn it in a circle where testing is coming after a lot of this, but in practice, test has to be right there with design. It has to understand at design time, what is it that you're developing for, what is it that you're designing for, and then start with that notion and cover the entire thing. So when we're talking about instrumentation for security, test has to play a role in there and say, how are you covering, let's say, cross-site script forgery, cross-site scripting in general? How are you going to make sure that there are phishing is not going to happen on your website or so on? So testing has to play a role right through that. So the implementation or the actual hands-on testing is going to happen there, and then once you do that, you certify. If you're an enterprise app, you have to certify for multiple things. It could be accessibility, it could be compliance of different sorts, so you do that. And then you deploy. So you need to understand how to deploy on various devices depending on what sort of application you have, and how to automate that deployment, right? How to make sure that we can have it industrialized, so to call it, keeps happening without any user intervention. And once you've done that, you have to manage your applications, make sure it's available for download, make sure the latest ones are being picked up by users and so on. And so what happens once it goes out to the market? Do you forget about your application? Obviously not. So you'd have to monitor, you'd have to obtain insights from that monitoring, right? So you have to do sentiment analysis, for instance. You would have to go read the reviews for your app, see how your app is doing, are there any crash reports on the app, is there some data that you can gather from there? So having done all of that, we're saying, industrialize the whole process. See how you can keep moving in this circle again and again for every release, for every app that you build. So here's where DevOps comes into this, right? How does DevOps play a part in this? Now let's just split up that entire process of creating a mobile application into 3 tiers. So there's the backend tier, or what you call the systems of record, which are probably your database systems, it could be your mainframes that you're talking to get information. And these are systems that typically you're not going to touch too much, right? So once you've designed, once you've decided what you want to put in there, the systems of record are going to remain largely unchanged. They are going to give you the backend data, they're going to give you stuff to work with, and they're going to be there. So there's going to be fewer deployments there, and you can have your traditional testing tools to take care of that testing, right? The traditional automation tools, your functional automation, integration testing, those tools could work well for you there. Now when we come to the second tier, that's the web services tier, that's also called the system of engagement, right? So system of engagement is frequent. You have frequent releases, you probably have 8-week or 12-week releases. Your web services are going to be developed and built and tested and deployed often, but not very often. Now if you come to the last tier, which is your mobile tier, which is again another system of engagement, you see rapid deployments. Now how often does Facebook update its app? Probably every 8 days, 12 days, you have a new update that automatically gets installed on your mobile device, right? So that's very rapid deployment. And how do they take care of testing, deployment, and all of that in such small cycles? And that's where DevOps comes in, right? And how do they do it? So the DevOps is basically trying to link every part of your organization. From the stakeholders, that's basically your business owners, your product managers, your directors who are in charge of your product development, keeping them in touch with the reality on the ground. And what was the entire cycle that you followed to get that happen, right? So I have a product in the market already. I have some insights on what users are doing with that product, what's the sort of sentiment. So someone could be, rubbishing my product on the App Store and saying, oh, this app absolutely sucks. Never go ahead and install the latest update, it just removes all your data. It's no good. And if your product owners are not tied into what's happening there, that's probably the death knell for your app. And how long does it take for you to switch off your app and go and download another one from the App Store? 10 seconds, I just go uninstall and go pick up another app that does something similar, right? So keeping everyone involved in this loop and making them understand what's happening in the thing is where DevOps comes in, right? So you have different tools, like I said, for your back-end systems of record. You can use your traditional tools, your traditional test management tools and automation tools. But when you come up ahead, you see testing does not stop where testing actually is supposed to end. it continues into a monitoring phase. So you have a quality assurance system that is monitoring the App Store for sentiments, it's monitoring the App Store for reviews, it's checking to see if there were any crash logs on your system. Is there a way for users of your application to directly tell you about bugs in the system? Can they pass information to you about issues that they're seeing with your application while it's in production? Is there a way for you to crowdsource your testing? If you could do that, that's great, right? Every time you have an update and you can push it over the air and tell testers of different groups, go ahead and go try this out. It's an alpha version or a beta version and come out and tell us what's wrong. If you could do that, that would make your monitoring a whole lot easier. Okay, so what is it that we're trying to do here, right? So we're trying to be lean and agile. Those are the two main buzzwords for DevOps, right? So what do you mean? When you say lean and agile, it means cut the waste. In simple terms, if it's not working, get rid of it, or find out a way to make it work right away, right? So the biggest waste I always say is if you know a product's not working and you continue to keep it in the market and keep spending money to keep it surviving, right? If you know it's not giving you good revenue, if it's a laggard, cut it, go do something else, find something that will give you value, right? So DevOps is going to help you do that, figure out in the quickest possible time what works and what doesn't. And while doing that, ensure that you reach success more often, right? And testing in this context makes a whole lot of sense because you know you're doing it to make the product live or have a quick death, not keeping it prolonging for no reason. Oh, okay, sorry. All right. So